Welcome to Diplomatic Channel this week. I am Amarachi Ubani. So security remains a major challenge here in Africa. Fighting continues in Mali's north. The DRC is still in conflict. Countries such as Libya and Tunisia, which participated in the Arab Spring, are yet to experience real stability. Even here in Nigeria, insurgency in the north has led to the loss of lives and property. You already know there's been a lot of attention on security here in Nigeria. Many of our bilateral ties have security top on the list. One of the countries we have strong ties to as concerns security is the United States, which already has a command in Africa, one of 6 of the U.S. Defense Department's geographic competence commands, responsible to the Secretary of Defense for military relations with African nations. And during a live web chat last week, the commander of AFRICOM, General David Rodriguez, and the Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, Linda Thomas Greenfield, talked about U.S. foreign policy and security cooperation in sub-Saharan Africa. Both mentioned one key solution to solving the problem: partnership. Africa has to do its part if it wants to have safer societies. While they both discussed efforts by AFRICOM in parts of Africa, they say they're not just concerned about the insurgency by Boko Haram in Nigeria, but government's response to it.
Our suggestion to the government is that they need a broad perspective. It's not all about security. They do have to take into account the impact of their operations on civilian populations, and hopefully as they go after Boko Haram, that they build a partnership with the civilian community.
Or working the mill-to-mill relationships and advising them in the same manner as the Assistant Secretary mentioned, to do a whole-of-government approach that includes the people, the security forces, and of course the government. And I think that it's going to be a challenge. It's a tough issue up there in that northeast where Boko Haram is, and we're all working together from many different directions to help move this forward and support the Nigerians in this struggle.
In diplomatic headlines, each week seems to reveal more and more of the U.S. involvement in phone tapping scandals with its allies. While Germany is still coming to terms with the Chancellor Angela Merkel's phone being tapped, Spanish media say the NSA also secretly monitored 60 million phone calls in Spain in 1 month. The reports say the latest allegations came from documents provided by U.S. fugitive analyst Edward Snowden. They say the NSA collected the numbers and locations of the caller and the recipient, but not the call's content. Spain has demanded the U.S. to give details of the eavesdropping. Over in Asia, 6 South Koreans returned by North Korea on Friday are said to have entered into the country through China. The men said they had been held in detention centers before their return. Some had experienced employment problems and had believed life in the North will be better. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the Israeli government has approved the release of another 26 Palestinian prisoners as part of a U.S. brokered deal for the resumption of peace talks. The prisoners were all convicted of murders committed prior to the 1993 Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The move is part of agreements reached since Israel and Palestine officials resumed direct talks in Jerusalem in August after a 3-year hiatus. Then, Afghan President Hamid Karzai is in the UK this week to hold talks with his Pakistani counterpart Nawaz Sharif. Britain will chair the meeting, which aims to improve troubled relations between the two Asian countries. Afghanistan believes that the Taliban's safe havens in Pakistan are the main cause of increased violence in the country.
Our bilateral ties on security continues with the African Partnership Station, an international initiative developed by the United States Naval Forces Europe-Africa, which works with the U.S. and international partners to improve maritime security and safety in Africa, as well as part of AFRICOM. The other week, a Dutch ship berthed on our ports. On board the ship were Military from 6 different nations who participated in trainings on maritime security, flood management and other humanitarian activities with their Nigerian counterparts. This past week, it was a turn of a South African ship, or the Spionkop. Members of the South African Navy trained alongside the Nigerian Navy for a 3-day anti-piracy boarding training. According to the Institute for Security Studies, the most notable event this year has been the increase in piracy incidents off the West African coast, particularly in the Gulf of Guinea. It says this continues the trend set in 2012, noted by the International Maritime Bureau, where despite a sizable drop in the number of attacks in East Africa from 237 in 2011 to 75 in 2012, a total of 58 incidents were recorded in attacks off the West African coast in 2012, and that's compared to 49 in 2011. And most times the incidences are reported as being criminal rather than piratical, as they do not all occur in the international waters, but rather within the sovereign borders of states, which are set at 12 nautical miles offshore, making them subject to countries' own laws and legal systems, rather than being subjected to international law, as is commonly the case of Somalia. Back to the ship's visit now. The SES Spionkop is a third of 4 Valor-class frigates for the South African Navy, built by the European South African Corvette Consortium. The name Spionkop originates from a famous battle that took place on January 24th, 1900, during the Second South African War, previously known as the Second Anglo-Boer War. Captain Michael Boucher explains the aim of this operation, which is to build and maintain cooperation with Africa, and Nigeria especially, and other African nations for better protection of their common maritime environment.
As you're aware, piracy is becoming the scourge of the African continent in terms of our sea lines of communication, and it's probably fallen on us as Africans to address those issues internally. So, along with the piracy problem, as well as other issues relating to maritime security, the various chiefs of navies will be discussing and hopefully pen out an action plan for the future.